Welcome to Legal AF MTN, that hot new channel everybody's talking about at the intersection of law and politics. We're doing it in collaboration with the Midas Touch Network. We're spreading our wings. We're bringing on some great new content, new commentators, including Lisa Graves of Court Accountability Action. She heads their research arm, True North. We got this amazing collaboration going on between Court Accountability Action and Legal AF MTN, and you're here for it because we're here for it. We've got a great topic to kick it off with on today's hot take with Lisa. Particularly, Lisa, let me do something provocative here and throw you a softball, not a hand grenade. You ready? Okay.
Okay.
Would we have a President Bush the second time, a second Bush presidency, if Clarence Thomas, who was in another scandal involving his wife, had properly recused himself? Yes or no?
No, we
All
would
right.
not. We would not.
Now you can tell the audience and our loyal fan base here why the entire all the scandals we've been talking about Clarence Thomas and his wife, particularly Ginni Thomas. When she's not busy in one cult, she's in another cult. She left. She got deprogrammed from one actual cult out in California. And well, in fact, let's play. I want to play the
Yep.
clip before we get it. Play the clip, Christine. That's our new producer of Ginni Thomas in the first cult.
This just unearthed footage shows the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas talking about her past when she belonged to a notorious cult.
When you come away from a cult, you have to find a balance in your life as far as getting involved with fighting the cult or exposing it.
Ginni Thomas was speaking to a cult awareness group.
All right. Now, she leaves that. She marries Clarence Thomas. She gets into another cult, which is the Heritage Foundation, Leonard Leo, MAGA, the precursor to MAGA. She's with Clarence Thomas. And there's a scandal that goes back to the year 2000. And Clarence Thomas and Ginni Thomas. Tell our audience all about it because only you have that insider knowledge.
Well, it really is an astonishing story, and most people don't know about it. But back in 2000, Ginni Thomas was working at the Heritage Foundation, and her job at the Heritage Foundation was to screen potential appointees for the George W. Bush administration if George W. Bush became president. Now, you may have heard of something similar recently because there's been a lot of reporting about Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation effort to basically use a second Trump administration to enact an enormous number of terrible policies. Part of that Project 2025 effort is a screening process to identify people to go work in a Trump administration who are loyalists. Well, way back in 2000, almost 24 years ago, that's what Ginni Thomas was doing. She was working for the Heritage Foundation. She was literally choosing who would go into the George W. Bush administration, who they would recommend. And at that time, the case came up to the US Supreme Court, and Clarence Thomas did not recuse himself from that case, even though he was clearly conflicted, even though anyone who would look at a situation like that would see that his wife created a conflict for him and that he had no business issuing a ruling, voting on that case. And as you know, Michael, that was a 5-4 decision. And what happened was the US Supreme Court, on a partisan basis with 5 Republican appointees, including Clarence Thomas, voted to stop the recount, to stop the counting of the ballots in Florida and overturn the decision of the Florida Supreme Court. So if that case had split 4-4, if Thomas had recused, then the votes would have been counted. And when the dust settled later, once those votes were actually counted, it turned out that Al Gore won Florida and would have become the president of the United States.
Yeah, let me jump in there. That in 2000, I was a young lawyer in West Palm Beach, Florida. I was on literally in the streets of West Palm, in front of and watching the counting at the county election office. This was when we had the butterfly ballot, right? That was being used in the county where Pat Buchanan, a virulent anti Semite, seemed to have polled quite well among the Jewish community in Boca Raton and in Palm Beach County, only because of this misalignment of the butterfly ballot. People were punching these holes, thinking they were voting either for the vice president under Gore, right? But not for Pat Buchanan. So you had about 5,000 votes that leaked out the wrong way to Pat Buchanan, and you had that whole hanging Chad thing, right? That famous photo of the judge from Broward County, Fort Lauderdale, with the giant magnifying glass. I knew that judge. I knew that judge holding up that belt, looking for the pregnant Chad and the hanging Chad and all. And while all that's going on, the Florida Supreme Court was like, "Yeah, we should have some more counting. Counting should continue until the early MAGA, proto MAGA, ran into federal court and ultimately to the United States Supreme Court on an emergency basis. Things were being done, as you remember, Lisa, in days, if not hours. We're watching a Supreme Court dragging its feet, taking months to help out Donald Trump. Then 20 days, everything was briefed, and they're at the U.S. Supreme Court on full briefing over days, in which the U.S. Supreme Court said, "Nah, we don't need to count every vote. We have the votes we need here, 5-4. We have our president." Right? And it was really a sad. Talk about because you and I talked before to get ready for this. Talk about the mistake. Listen, we love Al Gore, but talk about the mistake he made, and which the Republicans would never do, and how that impacted the result.
Well, that's right. As the days between early November of 2000, sort of it moved really fast and really slowly, basically, as these battles were taking place in Florida. And by December, the cases were being briefed, in particular with the Florida Supreme Court. And Florida, like a lot of states, has a rule where if the election is super close, like 0.5%, a tiny percent, there's a mandatory recount. This is not abnormal. This is just the usual standard operating procedures in the U.S. And so there was a request to pursue that mandatory recount, and there had been what was known as overvoting, as you mentioned, as well as other things that were happening with this. Do you count a Chad if it has not dislodged from the ballot for end up on the floor or not? Anyway, what happened really fast, which was it was only 4 days from the time that the Florida Supreme Court ordered that those ballots be counted, fully counted, and the U.S. Supreme Court intervened and stopped that count. And almost immediately, Al Gore conceded and deferred to the U.S. Supreme Court, and that the effect of that was to make George W. Bush president. I don't know how precisely Gore, should have or could have fought that, but I know a lot of people, myself included, were really disappointed that he did not continue the fight, did not press the case for having, our ballots counted. It doesn't make a lot of sense to be able to vote if those votes don't actually get counted. And these were ordinary procedures to actually make sure that the votes were counted accurately. And Gore was, in essence, gaining as that recount was happening. And so that's why the right wing Supreme Court, the partisan Supreme Court, wanted to stop it. And absurdly, Justice Scalia suggested that you couldn't have the votes be counted because that could call into question the legitimacy of George W. Bush being president. To which Justice Stevens, who was also a Republican appointee and the only Republican appointee to dissent, said the legitimacy is based on actually having the votes counted, not the opposite. But you could see just the partisanship of that court. And Clarence Thomas's partisanship was obviously his own, but also his wife, because I don't think any reasonable person would believe that he could be fair in that case if his wife was in the process of helping to staff that Bush administration. And in fact, over the next 7 years, the Heritage Foundation paid Ginni Thomas nearly $1 million over those 7 years, and made her one of the top highest paid employees at the Heritage Foundation. And she became the liaison for the Heritage Foundation to the White House, communicating directly with Brett Kavanaugh and the other lawyers in the Bush White House. And so this relationship, really, it stank then, but because it happened so fast, very few people knew that Clarence Thomas had such a conflict at the time and had no business sitting on that case. And again, if he had not, it would not have been a 5-4 decision for Bush. It would have at best been a 4-4 decision, tying, allowing those votes to be counted.
Well, two observations, Lisa. That's amazing reporting. Two observations. Clarence Thomas wasn't the only conflicted person on that court. I want you to comment on Scalia and his sons. You've done a great job at educating our audience about Clarence Thomas and his wife. And then we want to talk about Sandra Day O'Connor and her retirement, and why all those things came together as a perfect storm. Sandra Day O'Connor acting like she was double parked and had to leave really quickly in making her decision to vote a certain way. So you'll walk through all of those things, and then of course this is a rhetorical question. We wouldn't have Ginni Thomas today if Bush had lost and Gore had been rightly installed as the president, having gotten more votes and more electoral votes. Then she doesn't get that plum assignment. She doesn't make all that money with the Heritage Foundation. She goes into the wilderness for who knows how long, right? And the whole arc of history is changed, is altered. Yeah.
That's exactly right. It was momentous in numerous ways, including in both domestic and foreign policy, and also for the fortunes of Jenny Thomas and Clarence Thomas. But there were other conflicts, as you point out. So, for example, on election day in 2000, a law firm named Greenberg Traurig, which was leading the litigation in Florida on behalf of Bush, made a job offer to Justice Scalia's son, one of his sons, to John. That did not end up causing the recusal of Antonin Scalia, and that's not the only son who was working for a firm involved. The law firm of Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher was the firm representing the Bush team, the Bush campaign team before the U.S. Supreme Court. And one of Scalia's other children, Eugene Scalia, was working at Gibson Dunn at that time. But at no point did Scalia recuse himself from that case because of the potential conflicts caused by having his sons at two different law firms that were actively involved in this litigation to try to sweep George W. Bush into office.
And I know Greenberg well from having practiced law and still practice law in Florida. I have a lot of friends that worked at Greenberg. I met Traurig when he was still present. But they've had other conflicts in front of the United States Supreme Court, including with I believe with Justice Roberts. Somebody bought a vacation home, I believe, that was put up on the Supreme
That was
Court
Gorsuch.
bullet. Right.
Gorsuch.
Right. Somebody sold on the Supreme Court bulletin board in the kitchen. Apparently, they were. I'm being making right. They posted, vacation home for sale, and lo and behold, a law firm that regularly has business in front of the court bought it.
Yeah, that case involved Neil Gorsuch, who for years, as part of this real estate partnership, and had been trying to sell an expensive property in the Rocky Mountains that overlooked a river there. And lo and behold, suddenly, as Gorsuch was being confirmed to the U.S. Supreme Court, a managing director, a key person in Greenberg Traurig, bought that property from Gorsuch at basically the asking price, in essence. And Gorsuch did not disclose to the American people that he had just had a major financial dealing with a law firm that has a lot of business before the U.S. Supreme Court. Greenberg
Absolutely.
Traurig.
We'll do it on another. We'll do another True North update about things like Justice Roberts' wife making so much money as a legal headhunter, placing people in law firms who regularly have business in front of the court, that ecosystem. Clarence Thomas selling off his childhood home that nobody wanted to, I don't know, it was Harlan Crow or somebody like
Harlan
that,
Crow.
right?
Yep, and
Yeah.
Harlan Crow.
Harlan Crow, the Nazi memorabilia collector,
Yep.
with all of that, but I love I feel like we're on Homeland, where I have that bulletin board behind me with all the red ribbons, and yarn connecting everything. We're not conspiracy theorists, people. This is all true. And then you got
Yep.
Harlan Crow in the room with Clarence Thomas swearing in James Ho,
Yes.
right in
Yeah.
the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals as he's doing a tryout to get on the Supreme Court. And I
Yes.
mean, you can't make this up.
No, that's right. Reality is stranger than fiction. And I often think that despite my imagination, I lack the creative imagination to think of the types of conflicts that these people have come up with. Like, I had suspected that there were significant financial problems with Clarence Thomas's forms. And I suggested that there should be a forensic accounting of the assets because they just seem to be undervalued. But I had no idea. It never occurred to me that Clarence Thomas would have sold his mom's house to Harlan Crow, to a billionaire. And he increased the value of it right before the sale. He listed an increased value. And his spokesperson, in essence, suggested that he had to make improvements on it before Harlan Crow would buy it, which was
Right.
ludicrous. Like
Harlan Crow
the
wanted new linoleum.
yeah, like it's absurd. So you just can't make it up, the type of stuff that
No.
they're engaged in.
This
Yeah.
is what I love about our collaboration with Court Accountability Action and True North. They are, for those that are just new to this with us, They are one of the leaders here at exposing corruption at every level, federal court up to the United States Supreme Court, and things that are tangential to that or adjacent to that as well. And you don't find anybody finer with a finer eye for detail or research and analysis than Lisa Graves, who served this country in all three branches at every level. I think you are, and this is a compliment, I think you are in the nightmares of the Republican Party. You are the Freddy Krueger of the Republican Party. You appear in their nightmares, which is great for us, and we're so pleased to have you on our side in battling these people, because we need somebody like you in order to do that. We're going to do a lot more with Lisa Graves and with Court Accountability Action regularly, 4 or 5 hot takes a week, and out of their world into our world and bringing it here. And you can only find it one place: Legal AF MTN.
Yep.
Free subscribe. That's going to be my new middle name. Free subscribe. We're already at, get this number, Lisa, 208,000 as of the time of this recording. You and I recorded last week. We already were like 195.
Yep.
We're on our way to 250 by Halloween. It's really important, not because of ego, because of algorithm. The bigger we get, the more your voice is heard, which is why we're doing it here. We're spreading our wings over here with law and politics and collaboration with the Midas Touch Network. So until our next time together, follow Lisa Graves. Lisa, what's your, are you on social media? What's your social media handle?
I am. I regret to say that I'm still on X. It's at the Lisa Graves, at the Lisa Graves.
We're all sort of there against our will. At the Lisa Graves. Lisa Graves, also check out her 2 things. I want 2 plugs for you. Check out her podcast called Grave Injustice. Grave Injustice, a limited podcast series. We're talking to Lisa about doing some other things with her. Grave Injustice is one. And then some of what we're talking about here, you did in an article. Why don't you talk about that, and we'll put that article with a link to it in this particular hot take.
Yes, if you want the details about Clarence Thomas's conflict during Bush v. Gore, you can go to Common Dreams. Common Dreams has the full story, including a spreadsheet that shows how much Ginni Thomas was paid as a result of her husband deciding in favor of George W. Bush.
So great. A Supreme Court for sale. Who would have thought? And you can look for the link down below this particular hot take. We'll see you next time, everybody. In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories, the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.